So, this is the summary study of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, where Krishna draws an Upanishadic metaphor, the upside down tree. So, this is already familiar in the Vedic tradition. It allows Krishna to develop a profound explanation, and Arjuna, being familiar with the context, would understand its significance. Krishna begins with Urdhva Moolam Adha Sakham Aswatham Prahurabhyayam. There exists a tree with roots upward and branches downward. So the tree, often identified as a Banyan tree, Aswatha, symbolizes the material world. So its downward branches represent its entanglement in material existence, while its upward roots signify its connection to the spiritual realm. The leaves of the tree are the Vedic hymns which yield material results. So one who knows this tree truly knows the Vedas. So here Veda has got two meanings: to know and the Vedic scriptures. So Krishna emphasizes that the true knowledge of the Vedas involves understanding the entire tree, not just the mantras that deliver material results. Krishna explains that it binds human beings through karma. This is the description of the tree. Unlike animals, humans generate karma based on their actions. So the form of this tree cannot be fully comprehended. Its beginning, end, and foundation are inconceivable. So similarly, when Arjuna sees the universal form, he says there is no beginning, no middle or end. I just can perceive it. The key idea is asanga sastra. Sangha means attachment and asanga means detachment. So with the weapon of detachment and with firm determination, we must cut ourselves free. Now, what we are trying to cut? So we cannot cut down the tree itself, rather we must sever the attachments that bind us to the tree. So effectively, the tree will no longer exist for us. We will no longer be bound to it. The tree represents the material world. So the material world is ever present, but we can also free ourselves from material bondage. It is our attachment to material nature and the desire to enjoy its products that bind us. So this requires constant effort to detach from the habit. So after severing attachment to this world, Krishna emphasizes that it is not enough to simply stop engaging with material life. One must have a higher purpose. Seek that supreme destination by the divine path. Once you reach it, you do not return. Krishna says, after reaching this destination, one must surrender to the Purusha, the Supreme Person. This surrender is a central devotional principle. The Purusha is worth surrendering to, because from him this entire universe or existence has emanated. So he is the source of all existence. Surrendering to him completes our journey. So the Bhagavad Gita gives us more than the Upanishads. While the Upanishads emphasize the upside down nature of the tree and cutting off our entanglements, Krishna adds that we should do what we should do after freeing ourselves, such that we should seek the Supreme Person and surrender to him. So the process of devotion and surrender leads to ultimate liberation. In the path of bhakti, one cultivates attachment to Krishna and gradually material attachments fade away. So therefore Krishna is explaining the transition from jnana to bhakti. So unlike the paths of jnana or dhyana yoga, where one first detaches from the world and then discovers spiritual reality, bhakti bhakti offers a direct connection. Through devotional attachment, one achieves both detachment and spiritual realization. This is the unique and profound teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. So here in this chapter, in 6th verse, Krishna speaks of his supreme abode, calling it a place of no return. So Krishna explains that his abode is not illuminated by the sun, moon, or fire. So reaching this place ensures liberation, as one does not return to the material world. Krishna's references to the supreme abode as self-luminous emphasize its distinction from the material world. In that spiritual realm, no external light sources such as the sun, moon, or fire are needed because it is inherently radiant. So, 6 verses later, Krishna correlates this idea, explaining that the light of the sun, moon, and fire which illuminate this world originate from him. Thus, the material world depends on external sources of illumination, whereas the spiritual world is self-effulgent. So, in this chapter, Krishna builds upon the Upanishadic metaphor and relates it to his divine abode. By doing so, Krishna bridges the conceptual understanding of ultimate reality with the personal realization that he is the supreme being. So this connection underscores that the place of no return described in the Upanishads is none other than Krishna's supreme abode. So this understanding depends our appreciation of Krishna's personal relationship with his devotees and his role as the ultimate destination for all spiritual seekers. So the Bhagavad Gita as it is written by Srila Prabhupada is both transparent and transformative. So while it may not align with a strictly literal interpretation, it effectively conveys the essential meaning of Krishna's words. Prabhupada's purpose was not just to translate the Gita, but to inspire people to live by its teachings. So there is so much depth in the Bhagavad Gita that one could endlessly write about it. So here, Prabhupada's focus is not on technicalities like chapter transitions or structural nuances of the Gita, but on its concluding message. For example, at the end of many chapters, Prabhupada often highlights Krishna's flow of thought leading toward bhakti. His priority is to deliver Krishna's conclusion clearly and consistently. So, in this section of the Gita, Krishna begins with an Upanishadic metaphor and gradually connects it to the world view presented earlier in the text. Krishna explains the nature of the soul in this material world. The soul is bound to the body and trapped in illusion. Transmigration occurs when the soul leaves one body and enters another. Souls are disconnected from Krishna and caught in the cycle of birth and death. While the Upanishadic approach to jnana typically emphasizes detachment from matter and realization of the self as spirit, Krishna shifts the focus in the Gita. Here he emphasizes the need to recognize God's role in maintaining the material world. This perspective encourages connection with Krishna even while living within the material realm. So Jnana's goal is to detach from the material and move toward the spiritual, and Bhakti's approach is to see Krishna's role in the material world and use this awareness to develop devotion and surrender. By seeking God's hand in our daily lives, we can feel connected to Him and deepen our devotion. Krishna's focus on bhakti integrates both material and spiritual realms, making it accessible to practitioners at all stages. In verse 15.10, he states that only those with knowledge can perceive the soul's departure, while others remain bewildered. So imagine a person engrossed in watching television. They are so absorbed that even when a thief breaks into their home and steals the TV, the person doesn't stop watching. Instead, they follow the thief, continuing to watch the screen as it's taken away. This is akin to how the soul, bound to the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego, is carried away by the Yamadutas during transmigration. The subtle body, like a TV screen, captures the soul's attention, and the soul follows wherever it is taken due to attachment. So Krishna speaks about the Jnana Chakshu or eyes of knowledge in the Gita, which allows one to perceive higher spiritual truths. While the Upanishadic view focuses on seeing the Atma, soul, or Brahma, spiritual reality, Krishna expands this vision to include seeing his role in the material and spiritual worlds. This broader perspective enables a devotee to connect with Krishna while navigating the material realm. By encouraging readers to see Krishna's presence and role in their lives, Prabhupada makes the Gita's teachings accessible and transformative. So, the verse 10 in this chapter highlights how the soul departs from the body. Utkramantam sthitam vapi bhunjanam va gunanvitam vimudha nanu pasyanti jnana chakshusha. This verse highlights how the soul departs from the body and how it resides in the body and how it experiences the modes of material nature. Those without knowledge cannot perceive this, but those with the eyes of knowledge can. Krishna is not only referring to seeing the soul, but also to perceiving his divine role in creation and sustenance. And from verse 12 onwards in this chapter, Krishna elaborates on his involvement in our existence, presenting examples at the cosmic, terrestrial, physiological, and intellectual levels. So at cosmic level, Krishna explains that the sun, a source of life for the universe, derives its energy from him. Krishna sustains the sun, which maintains the entire cosmos. At a terrestrial level or at the earthly level, Krishna describes how he supports the earth in its orbit. For instance, the mechanism of gravity is orchestrated by him, allowing the earth to remain stable. And at a physiological level, at the bodily level, Krishna sustains the integrated process of digestion. Modern science has yet to replicate digestion artificially because it is a highly complex and sophisticated process. Food is transformed into energy by mechanisms established by Krishna. While we often take digestion for granted, we realize its importance only when it malfunctions. And at intellectual level, Krishna also provides the intelligence, memory, and instincts necessary for survival. Even animals like a lizard catching its prey function by instincts that Krishna provides. So, Krishna's teachings emphasize that recognizing his role is not limited to spiritual pursuits. We can see his presence even in the material world. Our very existence, our survival is evidence of his involvement. However, we often fail to see what God has given us because we are preoccupied with what he has given others. So, our survival depends on a delicate balance of factors beyond our control. If something had gone wrong, we might not have made it this far. This indicates that God has not abandoned us and continues to sustain us. Instead of taking life for granted or envying others, we should recognize the extraordinary value of being alive. So it is Krishna's arrangement that ultimately sustains us. Early morning, birds chirp and search for grains to eat. While the birds must search for food, That is, they should do their effort, but the grains must exist and be available for them to find. And that is God's arrangement. So, in this section of the Gita, Krishna's message is that God's role in our lives is undeniable and ever present, whether it is through the cosmic forces that sustain the universe, the physiological processes that keep us alive, or the instincts and the intelligence that guide our actions. Krishna's hand is evident. Recognizing this truth depends our gratitude and connection with Him. So it reminds us that every moment of life is an opportunity to grow spiritually and recognize His grace in all aspects of existence. So God's arrangement is the providing of grains. No matter how much the birds search for grains, unless God has provided the grains beforehand, they will not be able to find them. So each one of us can actually cultivate gratitude by appreciating at a fundamental level the gift of life. So after we see God's hand in our lives, we begin to ask, who is that God? Where is this coming from? We gradually start realizing that there is a person who is overseeing this reality. Once we realize that, we begin to focus on the ultimate reality. So in the 16th, 17th and 18th verses, Krishna talks about Brahma, Paramatma and Bhagavan. Essentially, all three are one. They are not different. They are all one reality. So, for example, Gulab Jamun. So, Gulab Jamun, we can think or say, those the smell of Gulab Jamun come across. Those who are inside get only the smell and it smells very good, but they have no idea what it is. So they call it Gula. Now, another person can also see the source of the smell and they notice that it comes from brownish spherical objects. So they come up with a name, say Jamun. But now, if they taste it, then they get the full experience of the Gulab Jamun. So they represent different experiences of the same object. So these three reality, Brahma, Paramatma and Bhagavan, are Sat, Chit, Ananda. However, when a seeker perceives a feature of the absolute truth, that aspect is perceived. When the seeker perceives only the Sat aspect of the absolute truth, the realization that is the absolute truth without any energy. It means that while we exist in this world and experience constant changes, we understand that there is some existence beyond this world. That existence is like an endless expansion of white light, eternal and unchanging. That existence is eternal. That is the unending existence, the absolute truth without any energy. And the seeker here is generally a Jnani. Now somebody may realize the Sat plus the Chit aspect. So when this happens, they understand that there is not just eternal existence, like an ocean or an endless stream of consciousness. It comes from a subject and goes toward an object. So that eternal, unchanging reality has material energy. Material energies refer to the power to oversee and control material existence. This is a second level of understanding which Krishna talks about in text 17. After this comes the perception of Sat plus Chit plus Ananda, the absolute truth with both material and spiritual energies. This is the perception of a Bhakta and Bhagavan. So it means that God is overseeing this world, but beyond that there is another world. In this other world, God engages in loving reciprocations. This world is not just an endless ocean of white light or a stream of consciousness. It is filled with God who has divine emotions. There are spiritual energies such as Antaranga Sakti and reciprocation. So the most complete perfection of absolute truth is when we perceive it as Sat, Chit and Ananda. That is, that is just like Gulab Jamun has smell, taste, sight and form. So the perception of absolute truth can be limited to just one of its features. But when there is complete perception of the absolute truth, that is when there is the deepest conviction. So Krishna concludes this chapter by describing these three levels of realization. And this is the highest understanding of God. So Krishna says that one who understands him in this way, not being bewildered, understands the highest reality. Such a person knows Krishna to be Purushottama, the supreme person. And Krishna says, one who knows me in this way fully worships me with their whole heart and all emotions. When we understand Krishna as the ultimate reality who maintains us in this world and exists beyond it, we worship him with all our emotions. Now, Krishna makes an even more conclusive statement. This means that iti guhya tamam shastram, that among all the knowledge in the scripture, this is the most confidential. So Krishna concludes by addressing Arjuna's question. So he started by addressing Arjuna's question about how the Jnana worldview overlaps with the Bhakti worldview. Krishna begins by using an Upanishadic metaphor describing the tree of life and explaining how we need to go beyond this material world and surrender to the person from whom has come. Then he describes the ultimate abode, and then this chapter reveals the different levels of realization and the complex nature of understanding the ultimate truth. So, thank you. This is the summary study of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15. Hare Krishna.